Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. This is such an awesome night. This is our first event of 2021. I'm super excited, and I'm really happy to have you all here. So for those who don't know, we're the Jersey City Tech Meetup. Basically, we host different events every single month covering different topics in tech, anything ranging from social media marketing to cannabis, to influencer marketing, to blockchain, anything. So whatever you're interested in, feel free to join the community. We have events that'll eventually be for you. If this isn't for you, then there's always going to be something for everyone. So I appreciate you being here and be part of the Jersey City Tech Meetup community. The entrepreneur's journey. This one's very special to me because, I started my first LLC back in 2015, I believe. And since then, I've had a lot of different endeavors I started and a lot of different ventures. And I've had successes, but I've failed in many different ways. And I've always wondered, like, yo, no one teaches you this stuff in school. Like, when is it time to form a business entity, or when do you get funding? All these different things that are very confusing when you're new to the game, or even if you've been in the game for a while, you're still unsure about a lot of this. So my goal with this event tonight is to bring together an awesome panel, which we've done. The panel is amazing, and really just talk about what it takes to be an entrepreneur and how to take your business to the next level. So I'm super excited to have everyone here. Thank you all for joining. Give us a follow at JC Tech Meetup on Instagram or any social media, or check out jctechmeetup.com for our future events and to be part of the community. So how I generally run these is in person. As you know, it hasn't been in person lately. We switched to digital, but basically I would start every event with giving the opportunity for anyone in the attendance to, raise their hand and share something they'd like to share, whether that's they're hiring for a position, they're looking for a partner or co-founder. Really, you have an upcoming event. Anything you got going on, I want you to share it with the community. So now that things are a little bit different, you can just go ahead and email me, ben@jctechmeetup.com, with anything you'd like me to share with the community. And I'll be happy to share it, because that's what it's all about. We're about collaboration here, and I love to have everyone be part of it. As far as the format of this event, there is the chat. So there's Q&A. And there's the chat in the bottom of your Zoom thing. So basically, if you have any questions for the panelists, be sure to drop that in the Q&A. For the chat, that's kind of going to be the networking bit. So throughout the event, feel free to introduce yourself, comment on things, just talk in general, and just kind of say hi to everyone and make yourself known. I kind of like these events to be fun and very cooperative. So it's not just sitting here and watching and seeing what happens. Be part of the conversation. Just make sure you switch that chat to everyone, because I think it's the initial default is just panelists. So you want to change that to attendees and panelists, and just introduce yourself, say what's up. Feel free to drop in right now and just get the conversation going. So thank you everyone for being here. Super exciting. Just a few things to cover, and then we will hop right into it with the panel. So for those who want to be part of the online community, feel free to search Jersey City Tech Meetup community on Facebook, and that's somewhere that you can be part of and just say what you're looking for, what you're working on, where people can help you, where you can help people, just to kind of a place where we could all stay in touch, and it's not just once a month like our monthly events. This is kind of an ongoing conversation. So I encourage you all to join the Jersey City Tech Meetup community. It's a really awesome thing, and I want you to be part of it. This thing keeps growing every month, and it's just really exciting. So very excited, as you can see, first event of 2021. Happy to be here. And speaking of excited, this is a big deal, because for those who know about the new Clubhouse app, I've been talking about it a bunch. It's a huge online networking tool that I think is the most social media app I've ever been a part of in my life. It gives you the opportunity to talk to anyone from like celebrities to investors. It's an amazing thing. So next month's event is going to be on Clubhouse. And the really exciting part about this is that it's going to be a hybrid in-person and virtual event. So for those who are more comfortable staying home, that's totally fine. We're still going to be doing a Zoom webinar. But for those in the Jersey City, New York metro area, it's going to be in person at our buddy Joe's new venue called Headroom Lounge. And it's so exciting because the last time I had an in-person event was in February of 2020. So it's been an entire year. So, there's going to be social distancing in effect, masks required, temperature check at the door. So we're going to be very safe and cautious about it, but we're really excited to just bring it back to in-person and just get that feel of just kind of hanging out with everyone again. And really, really excited. So go to jctechmeetup.com or check out the link in bio on Instagram for more information and lock down your spot. It's going to be an amazing conversation. Cannot wait for this one. All right, so a few sponsor announcements. I want to kick off by thanking NJ Tech Weekly. They cover our events every month and are always an awesome community supporter. So thank you for always being here and being part of the community. Mission 50, appreciate you always hosting us in your office space. They have amazing office space in the Hoboken area. So for those who are kind of sick of working from home and would like to change up their environment, they are offering free 10-day passes to the Jersey City Tech Meetup community, which is awesome. No strings attached, free 10 days. So if you're interested, hit me up and I'll get you in touch with the right people. I'd also like to promote BU Social Media Marketing, which is my other business that I'm working on, which I'm very excited about. It's basically we're helping brands to find and amplify their authentic voice. So we do everything from brand strategy to content creation to social media page management, WordPress sites. For anyone who's kind of feeling stuck on their marketing and needs some help, creating a strategy or even just doing all the work on the back end as far as creating content and, doing something that's going to build your following and get you to what you actually want out of your business, which is either, more web clicks, more sales, whatever that is for you, we're here to help. So if you or anyone is looking for help building the brand and taking the brand to the next level, BU Media is for you. So feel free to reach out to me, either DM me on Instagram or anywhere, or email me, ben@jctechmeetup.com. All right, I would now like to pass the torch to our awesome sponsor, Adam from McCarter & English. They are incredible supporters of this community. This is the first event that they're being a sponsor for, so I'm really excited to introduce him. And he's also a panelist as well. So I'd like to kick off with Matt saying a few words about McCarter & English, and then we'll jump over to the panel. So take it away. Sorry, Adam. I got mixed up there. My bad, brother.
No worries, no worries. Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it. So yeah, as Ben was saying, we're excited to be a part of the Jersey City Tech Meetup and excited to be a sponsor and just kind of support the ecosystem of technologists and people who are interested in technology and starting companies, entrepreneurship, things like that, with regard to the Jersey City Tech Meetup and really throughout kind of New Jersey and the region. Just a little bit about McCarter & English. We are a full service law firm headquartered in Newark, with offices up and down the East Coast, really pretty much every Amtrak stop is the way that I describe it, from Boston to Washington, D.C. My office, I split time between our East Brunswick office and our New York City office, although, lately, like most others, we have been full remote. So, like I said, McCarter & English, we're about 400 attorneys. The group that I work with in particular is part of the corporate law group, and specifically within that corporate law group, a subset that I work with pretty closely with a team that focuses on emerging growth and venture capital, primarily. So we represent a lot of companies that are looking to raise venture capital. We work with, investors that make investments, venture capital investments into early stage companies. So, we have a lot of experience in this space. We have a lot of expertise in this space, both from kind of the corporate legal side, but certainly also just the general fundraising side, how to structure a company, to position it for venture capital, what type of companies are generally attractive candidates for venture capital. Prior to starting at McCarter & English, I worked in the New Jersey governor's office and focused on a lot of economic development and policy issues for the state. And I think, sometimes people think of venture capital as kind of the end all be all means to capital, and frequently, access to capital is a much better way to frame it in terms of entrepreneurs needing access to capital, which can be a host of tools, one of which is venture capital, but debt, grants, all other forms of access to capital. So, we can certainly help kind of talk and think through different ways that companies can raise capital and get capitalized. Certainly, how to structure an entity, whether it be an LLC or a corporation. We'll talk a little bit more about it tonight, but just kind of some of the pros and cons there. The group that I work with was recently named Dealmakers of the Year by the New Jersey Law Journal. We're one of the top 10 law firms on the East Coast and the only one without a Silicon Valley office, ranked, industry-wide for the amount of work we do with venture financings and companies that are looking to raise venture capital. So, we support Propelify and a lot of other initiatives throughout the state and throughout the region and really enjoy being a part of kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and certainly lending whatever degree of help we can to entrepreneurs or to people who are interested in starting a business or early stage companies. And like I said, certainly on the legal side, but also just kind of on the fundraising side, on the education side. So happy to be a part of the Jersey City Tech Meetup. And if there's anything we can ever do to help, certainly feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam. And I think you mentioned something before the call about you're going to send pizza to every single attendee that.
Yeah, that's always part of the agreement is, sponsors bring the pizza. So everyone should expect, a box to their door momentarily.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you. I appreciate McCarter in English. So thank you for being here. And yeah, without further ado, if the rest of our panelists could unmute and turn your videos on, really excited to kick this thing off and talk about the entrepreneur's journey. So before we jump into it, I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A bar below because we're going to cover audience Q&A throughout the event, and towards the end, we're going to dedicate some time as well. So without further ado, I wanted to kick off with everyone doing a little bit of an intro, saying who you are and kind of what you do on this entrepreneurial journey. So I'm going to go according to who's first on my screen, and that is Lloyd.
What's up, y'all? I'm Lloyd. I'm the Chief Executive Bear over at Bananas. We specialize in spreading happiness and a new take on banana pudding. We have 2 brick and mortars. We wholesale to cafes, restaurants. We do catering, Smorgasburg in Brooklyn, nationwide shipping. Our goal is just to make you happy, and that's pretty much all we do.
I love that. I love that. You make me happy right now. So thanks.
I'm trying my best, bro.
You're accomplishing
Maybe after the
goals.
pizza gets delivered, Lloyd can give us some samples.
Yes, exactly. I guess a lot of samples are going around. Everyone drop your addresses in the chat.
Location, I got you.
Awesome. Jumping over to Matt Barbieri.
Hey, everybody. Excited to be here. I wish I had a title like Lloyd because that's phenomenal. And that definitely made me smile. I unfortunately have a slightly more boring background. I'm a CPA, been in practice for 21 years. I'm a partner at WIS, and I run the media technology and life science practice. And so as a result, I see companies from formation and early days and, all the way through, hopefully, whatever the desired exit is, IPO, sale, strategic. And so I'm here to try to help demystify a few of the areas of tax that a lot of people come and ask me questions about in the early days, and hopefully help us not only avoid mistakes, but make some pretty smart decisions. So happy to be here.
Thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate you. Jumping over to Clark. Super impressed with the pandemic beard, brother. You want to give a little intro?
Yeah, I switch it up, especially when you throw up the headshot. I look absolutely nothing like that anymore. But Ben, thanks a lot for having me here. I'm always really excited to chat about entrepreneurship stuff. Like most people in this space, not only do I work in the startup game, it is a big part of what I'm interested in, and I love talking shop all the time. So thanks for having me. I am currently the technology sector lead for the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. So I actually know Adam from back in his time in the governor's office. What the Economic Development Authority does is we're actually not part of the state government, but pretty much as close as you can get, just like the Port Authority or the Turnpike Authority. We're an authority of the state, so we're a quasi-government agency. Really what that means to most people is we're not supported by taxpayer money. We're self-sufficient and self-standing. But beyond that, we're pretty much part of the government. And our real goal for where I focus is to drive what we call the innovation economy. Historically, we were more like a financing institution, like a commercial bank on behalf of the state. But with the incoming Murphy administration, we really were challenged to become a more holistic economic development group. So I've kind of transitioned from just working with tech startups to owning the whole technology vertical within the state, which is can be pretty all-encompassing. We have other verticals that you might be aware of, like offshore wind, clean energy, logistics, and transportation. There's a lot of focuses here in the state now. I have a team of 3 people that just focus on the north of the state. For us, that's New Brunswick and above. And we focus our efforts in pretty much 3 areas. Incentives, which is just a fancy word for tax credit programs that target the industry. We do have direct financing, so we can participate and invest into startups if they are raising outside rounds and meet the other definitions. And we also are LPs and venture funds. And then the third largest vertical, which I would throw this type of activity in, is what we just say as ecosystem building activities. So that can be participating in panels like this, or other programs like we have an investor introduction program, one that helps drive NJ Ignite, which helps get entrepreneurs out of the garage or basement or living room in non-COVID times and into a co-location facility like Mission 50. They're approved sooner, because we believe that getting more involved with the community has a direct correlation to how fast and how successful your business can be.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Clark. I look forward to diving deeper into NJEDA. It's an awesome organization, so appreciate you being here. I'd like to jump over to Megan, who is currently in Uruguay, which is awesome. Thank you for being here, Megan. I appreciate it. You want to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Awesome. I'm delighted to be here. This is such a kick-ass panel of people, and it's such an honor. So thank you for the invite. So my name is Megan Elof. I am a South African currently living in Uruguay, and I'm a feminine empowerment coach. That is my vocation, which I recently discovered about a year ago. I like to say that I'm a recovering restaurateur. I had a restaurant in South Africa for 8 years. And after that, I started building a travel business. And I had this big idea of all of these amazing places I was going to visit, Uruguay being the first one on the map, and setting up travel experiences in far remote places in nature with really delicious food and wine. And needless to say, I never left Uruguay. But it's been an amazing place. And it led me to my vocation, because I suddenly realized, okay, I've got to switch things up here. What am I going to do? What am I going to do now? And I just let my creative energy flow wherever it wanted to. And I always loved the leadership aspect of running a business. I had about 30 employees at my restaurant, and so that's why I studied to be a coach, was to really become a better leader for my people. And I didn't really intend on becoming a coach necessarily, but luckily I had all of that behind me and a lot of skills under my belt. So it really set me up for pivoting into a coach. And I'm currently working with female entrepreneurs and helping them through this journey of entrepreneurship and really just discovering their own way, because there's so many influences out there. It can be really difficult to decipher what actually works for me. What is the kind of business that I want to set up? What aligns with the kind of lifestyle that I want and the life that I want to build for myself? So I really help women tune into their intuition and really just, walk that journey of what works for them and what aligns with their life. And so that's who I'm serving currently. And I absolutely just love what I do.
That's amazing. Awesome. It's such a great panel. I'm loving everyone here. And I know, Adam, you talked about McCarter in English a little bit, but if you want to share a little more just about Adam, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Certainly talked about the firm, and that certainly gave us, as Ben was saying, a pretty good overview. Like I said, I'm an attorney, somewhat like Matt, probably a little less interesting than the rest of the panelists with regard to the legal advice that we look to provide. But look, it's important information, and I certainly have a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs where their lack of either legal guidance or proper tax guidance in the early stages then create kind of expensive, time-consuming and costly headaches. So I guess that's perhaps just a little bit of a plug for what you're going to hear, and just kind of making sure that certainly the business itself needs to be sustaining, but you also want to make sure that it's being structured the right way, and that's certainly part of what I hope to do with clients, and certainly when I'm part of these types of presentations and panels.
Awesome. Well, I just want to drop in and just say, y'all are extremely interesting in your own special ways. All right. We need all of this information. It's very important for entrepreneurs. And I know myself personally, I've needed information from each and every one of you. And it's, yeah, very useful. So I appreciate you all being here. I love this panel. I'm very excited to have you. So we're just going to jump right into it. I want to kick off with Lloyd. You know, as the Jersey City Tech Meetup, I want to talk to someone with a business in Jersey City that you got off the ground. I'm curious to hear about your experience, you know, starting your own brick and mortar and kind of like what that journey and what that process was like, and maybe some of the challenges along the way of getting that off the ground from nothing.
Yeah. So we got our start in 2015. It was very serendipitous. We started selling, my fiance and I, we started selling our banana pudding on Instagram to try to fix our car. We started off as a fundraiser and just, you know, needed money. And from there, we fixed the car, and we were kind of blessed with a business, and with no business background and not really knowing where to go. It was really just about learning as much as we could through books and through pretty much just learning through the hard way of just making a bunch of mistakes. And boy, did we make mistakes. And at the beginning, I think the first lesson that I learned was we only had two resources, which is time and money, and we didn't have a lot of it. We were in college at the time, and we knew our end goal was a storefront in the city that we were born and raised in, but we knew we were years away from doing that. And so, you know, we did what we could with the time that we had. We first started off with wholesaling to cafes and restaurants, you know, other than our school schedule, which is set in stone. With the other time that we had, we dedicated that to production. We got into Smorgasburg in Brooklyn, New York City's biggest food market. We were off on weekends, and we dedicated Thursdays and Fridays nights after our college classes to just making a buttload of our take on banana pudding. And you know, at the beginning, we just reinvested everything that we made back into the business. And around 2017 was when I was able to, so that's 2 years after we started, that's when I was able to take on Bananas full time. Trisha, she went to law school. She's now a full-time attorney because she's awesome like that. And when it comes down to biggest lessons learned, I think that understanding how to grow with your priorities and with your lifestyle, like what Megan mentioned earlier, like building a business with your lifestyle and your goals and your values in mind. I think that's the most important thing. And luckily, we were able to do that from the beginning. We were able to build a strong foundation, systemize it, and then start growing other ventures. And so I think burning out and doing way too many projects is one of the biggest mistakes anyone can do. And by being able to focus on what's important to you, and then systemizing that, and you know, key hires and just growing smart and growing with your heart at the center of everything in your values. I think that needs to be the driving force for however you grow your business, and that's what we've tried to do the last 6 years.
No, that's incredible. I love what you're talking about with, you know, making sure you have that firm foundation, because I feel like a lot of people just like hit the ground running, and sometimes it's just going after the money and they're not really thinking about, you know, what their values and their goals are. So you kind of keep that at the forefront of your heart and know what you're doing where you're going. That's very important. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Lloyd.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm kind of going on to like the business formation and like when you're starting a business. I want to jump over to Adam. So for entrepreneurs who are kicking off a business, you know, I feel like a lot of this is new to them. So they don't really know what type of entity to form, or even when it's the right time to form, or if they even need to form until later down the line.
Right.
I just wanted to get your perspective on kind of what advice you would give those who don't really know where to begin with the formation process.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think, so to kind of take the first part of it, I guess, I think, you know, the reason to have a legal entity in a business entity, you know, whether it's an LLC or whether it's, you know, a corporation, I would say, or, you know, certainly the two most common. So I'll spend kind of my time and give some thoughts around those two, although there certainly are others. You know, the primary reason I would say, and I think the one that comes to mind most frequently, is for liability protection, so that, you know, if you're running a business, and, you know, something goes wrong, let's say, your personal assets, so, you know, the money you have, your house, your car, those types of things, there is protection in the eyes of the law that someone, you know, if they were to make a claim, it wouldn't be against you personally, it would be against the assets of, you know, the business, so the products that the business have, the money that the business has. So I think, you know, that's the reason to form an entity. And certainly, you know, then you want to work with someone like Matt to make sure that you're separating those things and, you know, accounting for, well, maybe not Matt, but someone in Matt's field, Matt's great, who can help to make sure that, you know, you're keeping those two things separate, kind of the personal staying personal, the entity and the business is staying, you know, with the entity and the business. From a record keeping perspective, from a property perspective, you know, what product does the business own, make sure that there's no confusion as to whether, you know, that's owned by someone individually. So I think that's kind of the general reason to have a legal entity. You know, depending on the complexity of the business endeavor, you know, I think you can certainly use some of the online forms that are available from like a LegalZoom or something else, just to kind of get something on paper. And then depending on how the business grows, you can always, you know, talk to an attorney or look for more customization as things progress. But I think to answer one of the questions about when the appropriate time is, generally I would say, you know, sooner than later, but I think certainly when you're looking to kind of commercialize a product or begin sales, you're definitely going to want it when I think you're beginning to kind of develop maybe some intellectual property, or start to, you know, look for customers. You know, I would say all of those are times when you're going to want to have the legal entity so that you can have those separation from the two. You know, if you're just kind of doing research, if you're just, you know, still putting together the outlines of a business plan, it may not, it certainly doesn't hurt to have it, but I don't think it's necessary at that point. But again, earlier the better if you know that you're going in a certain direction. And certainly as you begin to kind of commercialize things, certainly if you're going to take on employees, you're going to want them. And then, you know, the choice of an LLC or a corporation, just to kind of use those two, really depend a lot. I think, you know, what Lloyd was talking about, kind of the goal and the vision of what, you know, the business is, and there's pros and cons to each type of entity. And, you know, I don't know that we have time to get into all of them now, but you know, certainly talk to an advisor. You know, there's a good amount of information online if you just try and Google it and then maybe get some education yourself, and then talk to someone, you know, from, you know, maybe that Clark can point you to from kind of a small business development center, or, you know, some other entity around the state that kind of provides some type of, you know, support to entrepreneurs and things like that. There's a lot of those organizations in the state, fortunately. And then I think, you know, that can certainly help to give someone some direction from that perspective, from that standpoint.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate that. And I know you mentioned kind of finding someone like Matt or in Matt's field about doing the accounting aspect of it. And that's something I'm interested in learning about too, you know, kind of like
he stole my stuff. Like I get he's the sponsor and all. I got stuff I was going to talk about. And now I got to go on the fly. You know,
we're doing live here.
Sorry,
Matt. Matt, when is the point someone should start thinking about their accounting? Because I know with a lot of business I kind of just would use my like personal card and do it all like that. Like, when do you have to really take that into the business element?
So it's very interesting that Adam said it. I wrote, this is one of the first things you learn in accounting when you're like at your dumbest, and it is do not commingle funds. And it's an enormous no-no. It brings up a litany of issues down the road. So a couple things that are interesting, and you gain all these things. You gain perspective generally from going through a bad experience, teaches you a whole lot. And so I would advise you to talk early to somebody or a group of people that you trust. And typically what I'll see is I'll engage with somebody, not in a professional way, not in a formal way, and help them steer the right direction. So I'll give you two quick examples of why you need some guidance. And so, Adam, a year ago, if somebody asked me like, what do we do on the legal side? We got docs, we're 3 friends, we just want to set something up. I'd be like, you don't need a lawyer. Go to LegalZoom, set some shit, like they got docs, you find stuff online, do it yourself. I had a recent, thing pop up. A client came to me, they're in distress, brand new. I'd never spoken to them before. And they did that. They stole a set of documents online and they organized as a C Corp. And, one of the early decisions is how many shares. And they look, and then there is no correct answer to that, but most commonly it's 10 million shares. And, you put 10 million shares down. These people thought they knew what they were doing. And they're like, you know what? We're going to use these shares for a long time. We're going to raise a lot of money. So we're basically going to give 10 to the 3 founders. So 30 shares. We got 9.9 million shares here to, do what we want with later to raise money. They raise a tiny round of seed capital and they get a notice from Delaware that they have to do their franchise filing. So they go to do the franchise filing and they owe $130,000 in tax. And they call me and they're like, dude, we got introduced. You got to make this go away. Anyway, long short, the reality is that they're not going to realistically be able to get out of the entirety of that amount because there's 2 methods to calculate the tax on the par value of the shares. So that's one big thing that would drive into my answer of talk to people early, talk to somebody like Adam. It would take 3 seconds for Adam to explain to somebody, this is the structure, this is why, and not create this whole hill of beans. And secondarily, when it comes to the accounting, you want to talk to people at the outset to just understand what are the tax things that I need to worry about, because it's generally not just you any longer. You're typically in the business with a friend, a co-founder, family members. You might have taken some money in. And once we take that money in, there's consequences. And you don't get to do what you want, meaning you don't get to make up the rules if you've already acted by signing an operating agreement, for example, or throwing some stuff together. Oftentimes you find yourself not being able to fix those things. So I would say communicate early to a group of people that you trust. Don't get yourself into this monster engagement that's bigger than it needs to be at the time. And determine what are the things that you really need from a financial perspective to measure to run your business. For the early company, raising 50 to 100 grand, something like that, you don't need accounting, to be honest. You don't. You can keep it in Excel, QuickBooks, Xero, have a handle on the things that make you run your business better. And you don't need to engage in a formal way for bookkeeping or things like that till a little bit of a later date. Now, I know most of my profession would argue like crazy with me on that answer, but if I was to start a company today and I had 50 grand, I would not be spending any material portion of that on accounting services.
I'm the master of spreadsheets too, so I'm kind of right there with you, but I'm surprised to hear that coming from you.
It's adequate.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about the tax, like what do we need to know for taxes? What are the things we need to know for taxes? I'm just going to ask you right here, right now.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, the list of those things is like 6 miles long. When you start a company, you just got to figure out how does that impact you? And so it goes back to Adam's thing about structuring. LLC is a flow-through entity. And so whatever happens in that business, a portion of that is going to flow to me. And so what you've got to understand at the outset is what are the parameters in which we're going to allocate that income or loss? How do I take money in or out of this business? How do I make sure I capture my appropriate capital account? Because you don't want to run into a situation where, generally the advice in the early days is to organize as an LLC because it's usually close money, friends, family, fools, people that we can convince to give us money. In the early days, we're losing money. We're creating losses, generating losses. Those losses are valuable. Like the reality is I want losses. The more you could give me, the better. There's some nuance to the structure of those losses and whether or not I'm able to utilize those things. But you want to take a look at your personal situation and take 15 minutes to determine end of the year what's going to happen here. Because again, oftentimes I'm still working a 9 to 5. I've got a W-2, with somebody else. I've got this company. You may or may not be able to offset those losses that you think you're going to generate over here. So pay attention to those. Don't miss your Delaware registration. Generally don't need to be that worried about income taxes. Most companies in the early days aren't generating income. So the thing you do need to worry about is sales taxes. Determine if your product is sales taxable, and that runs by state, and that's a major within itself. It's something just to be aware of. And I'll come up with more as we go. I can't talk. I feel like I'm the only one talking. There's a lot of people here.
Oh, I appreciate, Liz, I appreciate it. Even though Adam said all the material you had prepared, look, you came up with a bunch of great stuff.
Stole it.
I appreciate that, man. I'm sure we'll dive more shortly. But I kind of on staying on the note of money and what to do with all that money you have. I want to jump over to Clark real quick because I feel like a big question a lot of entrepreneurs is, when is it time to start fundraising? / do I need to fundraise, or should I bootstrap this shit? And that's like a huge general question. I want to just like get you to clear the air. What is the right time?
Well, you know, when it comes to as everyone loves to, like, the money, the answer almost always is it depends. And not to backtrack too much, but both what Matt and Adam said, I can't echo how important those things are, because my friends know that I'm in the startup game and ask me questions all the time. And I have real life examples. Not Lloyd, but another friend of mine called and was doing the Instagram game, selling his grandma's pickles. And his friend called me and was like, what should he do? I'm like, does he have a lawyer? He better structure that company. He's like, no, he's just doing it on his own and making a killing. I'm like, all right, well, I hope he doesn't get someone sick. 2 weeks later, what do you think the phone call was? Oh, someone on Instagram said his pickles made him sick. I'm like, all right, guess he needs that lawyer now. Same thing last week, my buddy hits me up and's like, Clark, it's tax time. I started a business. I spent all this money. You know, I want to use it on my taxes. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, do you use QuickBooks? He's like, what's QuickBooks? I'm like, dude, forget it. Forget it. Like, you're going to make up all this stuff and you're going to get audited. And I work almost from the government. Guess what? The government wins. Startups, I have startups that are in my portfolio that have gotten out of nowhere. Sales tax come after them. Another one, labor. They didn't do their labor right. They were working here in Jersey, and they also had people over in like we work in Manhattan. Both New York and New Jersey labor departments came out after them for audits. You might not owe money, but once you get audited, you gotta call Matt, and now you're looking at a price tag. So, you know, definitely listen to that stuff. And most people will, especially like people on this panel, they'll talk to you for free. They'll give you a little bit right off the top just to point you in the right direction. Like, it's not going to start the clock right off the bat. So definitely ask questions. Now, going back to Ben, your initial one, it depends, right? Like, I am one that says, put off outsider money for as long as possible. Bootstrap, you know, I don't count, you know, friends and family as outsider money, right? Like, they're giving it to you because of a personal relationship. I honestly push back and say, like, try not to do that, right? Like, nothing alienates friends than tell them like, yo, I lost your 10 grand and guess what? You're not getting it back. Like that, you know, I kind of really investigate in companies, especially like if who they've gotten their money from and who their partners are too, right? You know, like sometimes husband and wife teams aren't the best. So you got to really think those things through. Now, some people will completely take the 180 and be like, you should never put your own dime into it and you should get outsider money immediately. I would say that's easier said than done, especially in this geographical region, right? Like, this isn't the Valley, right? Like, geniuses don't drop out of high school, write an idea down on a napkin and find someone on Sand Hill that gives them $10 million. Like, that just doesn't happen, right? Now, if you're an experienced entrepreneur or you're lucky to be one of those geniuses, like, yeah, you could probably get some money right off the bat. Make sure it's the right money. You know, I've seen people, we had a guy in our incubator who went right out and took 50 grand for 50% of his company when he was starting to a guy that owned a construction firm. Like, that guy didn't know what was going on. They butted heads from the beginning, and a year later, he was out, the contractor was out 50 grand and the other guy was out of his business. So I guess kind of the moral of the story, I think, is put off taking outsider money for as long as you can. Try to run on your own personal funds. And then the biggest thing I think any investor will say is sales. Like, you need to go out there and sell something and run that business off of revenues. Then once you get to the point where you have market validation and you want to go from just selling one or two of whatever it is to millions, and you can't grow that fast just on what your resources are now, that's when you go out and get outside investor money, whether that be a bank loan or some sort of equity investor, typically an angel, or maybe you participate in an accelerator and they're going to invest and lead a round, or a small VC fund. I don't consider grants to be like an investment, right? But nowadays there's more a wider variety based on maybe you can find business grants because of who you are or what you're doing. Usually though those are more like hard sciences and stuff like that, where you're doing research. So that would be my thing. Try to run off of revenues for as long as you can, and then when you have a strategic reason to take capital, go and get it. Just remember, if you were starting this business to be your own boss, the second you have outside money, you are not your own boss anymore.
Clark, you can't be finished yet, because I got invested in that story, and now I got to know, like, did that entrepreneur become like part of a construction project? Is he okay?
Which one?
The guy who took
guy
50
that took
grand
the money
from the construction
Did he
guy?
end up
I don't know.
Remember?
I don't know what happened. So he was, like a post grad at Rutgers and moved into our incubator, and he was not, he wasn't from America. So I don't know where he went. Like the company folded, he left. I mean, he could have.
Megan, be on the lookout. There's a
He might,
chance he's in Uruguay,
he
or
could
he's
be
under the
South
stadium at
America way at
Rutgers.
this point. But yeah, they used to get into some screaming matches in the conference room at our incubator. That's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, that's incredible. And yeah, sorry, Adam, did you have something you want to jump in there with?
Yeah, I just, I think as Clark and Matt are alluding to, the greater the level of complexity that you're envisioning in terms of, product offering, the number of other, co-founders, or, things like that, the more you're going to want to lean on, the people that Matt mentioned and have those conversations early with a trusted advisor group. These things are complex, and it's hard to unwind them if they're not done the right way. So if you're contemplating, you think you're the type of business that will eventually want to raise, outside capital, it certainly makes sense to structure it in a way that both, protects you, to the example Matt gave, so that you're not going to own, 10 shares. Also, so that it's structured, from a legal perspective to make it attractive to, outside investors eventually, because there's things you can do at a formational level that, put yourself in a much better position that investors will want to see and expect to see. A lot of it just comes down to kind of the vision and mission, certainly. And look, not every company should raise capital. Not every company that, is started should look for outside capital. It really becomes a personal decision about kind of how do you look to grow, where's your markets, how much capital you need to reach those goals. But I think the bigger those numbers get, the more complexity from the foundation. You may ultimately decide you want to, do something yourself, and then, engage someone, kind of like Matt was referring to, as things grow and get larger. But I think you at least want to know from the outset, so that you can make an informed decision about whether to go with some kind of the standard forms that are available online, or whether it makes sense to spend that money at the very beginning to structure it in a way that will protect you and protect the company down the road. So again, the more complexity, the more you should be speaking to someone early. And I certainly think it's a good idea to talk to someone regardless of that. But maybe just as kind of a general quick, heuristic or guide as to thinking about, when to engage and when not to engage, or, when to think about, how to structure from the beginning.
That's great. I appreciate that, all of you. That's a lot of useful info. Gems dropped there. So I'm glad that Matt called it out. That I wanted to hear the rest of that story too. I needed to see how that played out. But we're talking about kind of, how added level of complexities come in with, when you have investors or different partners, things like that. So I want to jump over to Megan and kind of talk about like some of the structure of having a business, right? You've owned multiple restaurants in your life. I want to know, when is it time to bring in a partner and have someone you want to share it with and kind of go on the journey with, or when it's time to do these things on your own and really just kind of focus on yourself and from your experience?
Yeah, well, I can only speak from my experience. And I got into business when I was quite young. I was 24 when I started my first restaurant. And before that, I'd actually just come back from the States, and I was adamant to start the food truck movement in South Africa because it hadn't yet arrived, and I'd seen how amazingly it worked in LA, And I was like, I'm going to get this started in Cape Town. And I started doing all the research, and needless to say, there were too many rules and regulations, and it wasn't actually possible to do. And then I ended up meeting my business partner at a bakery that I worked at. And I ended up getting into business with him. Lloyd mentioned in the comments, mentors is everything. So we met by chance, and he was a customer of mine, and I never actually asked him what he did with his days. And one night I walked into, he had this little garage where he would cook burgers on like a DIY half barrel drum. There he was flipping burgers, and I was like, I just walked in by chance as a customer one night, and there he was. And literally 3 weeks later, we had a chat about my plans. He obviously saw a lot of potential in me and wanted somebody with the energy. He's twice my age. So he wanted someone young with energy to really drive the business and to be the operational partner. And it was just the perfect timing for both of us. And so I ended up getting into business with him. It was one of the most challenging things, yet also the most rewarding, because I got to learn from so many mistakes that he had already made in his 30 years in the industry. So, talking about getting investment from outside, he taught me never to borrow any money. And so we literally would sell enough burgers to make enough money to buy another piece of equipment, and then we would buy the equipment and hire somebody to run the piece of equipment. And so we literally grew super organically. We never invested any money. We didn't really even need to invest much of our own, but he was the landlord. And so he was my landlord, my business partner, my mentor, my friend, all in one package. And so he held all the cards, right? And he knew exactly how to pull my strings. So 8 years in business with him, it was really such a journey. And I learned a lot of lessons from being on the receiving end of, just the hard lessons, right? It was a gift that he taught me to run a business that way and to build a business that way, but you can't scale a business that way. So, now in my business, my coaching business, I am in the stage where I'm so happy to be doing it alone because, like the other guys mentioned, I don't have to worry about anybody being my boss or having to answer to anybody. This is really my year to just figure out how do I grow this business in a way that really aligns with the lifestyle that I want, and scale it when I feel ready to scale it, not because my coaches and my mentors say, now you got to scale it. So last year I actually borrowed a lot of money. So I learned one way from my partner, but I realized there is truth to needing to borrow money to make money. And I wouldn't have been able to invest in the coaches and the mentors that I did last year had I not borrowed that money. And if I hadn't been able to invest in them, I wouldn't have been able to grow as quickly as I did in my current business. And so, every situation is different, but finding the right people to talk to, as what's already been mentioned, is so vital. And even getting second opinions and doing your own research. It's so important to educate yourself and make sure that you're empowering yourself. So many of the women that I work with, that I coach, avoid their finances. They're so afraid of it because they don't understand it. And it's just because they don't understand it that they avoid it. And because they avoid it, they're afraid of it. And so just by educating yourself and really understanding what it entails, you eliminate so much off your plate, so much anxiety and added pressure that really doesn't need to be there. It's, and I worked every single position in my restaurant. I had to teach myself how to do bookkeeping, how to do accounting. I had to learn how to do all of that because I couldn't afford to pay somebody to do it for me. So it's the best thing I ever could have, I'm going to say, have been forced to do, sorry, because it's such a powerful tool to have. Now running my business, I know how to do all of it myself, and I know when I get to the point where I need help, and that's when I get to ask for help.
That's amazing. And I want to follow up on that, and I'm going to direct it to you, but this is open to anyone. So if anyone here has anything to add, just feel free to pop in. So if you do get to that point when you feel you're ready for a partner or some outside help, or you want to delegate some things, what are some tactics or places you go to find that person? Because I feel some entrepreneurs are stuck. Like, I need a partner, I need a co-founder, I need a tech person. Where the fuck do I find that? So from your experience, or anyone here, where would you say is a good place to start looking if you're in the market for a partner?
Yeah, well, I would start here. There's a lot of value in this room. But for me, the way I found my coaches is I just kept asking questions. Stay curious. Staying curious is the thing that is always going to set you up for success, because you just keep asking questions, and one question will lead you to the next, to the next, to the next, and eventually it'll lead you to where you want to go. So that's what I have to say to that.
Yeah, I'd chime in, kind of seconding that, right? Like, ask your network.
Yep.
Be out in the, COVID kind of puts a little damper on it, but be out in things like this and talk to people and ask, like, go to hackathons or stuff like that. Tons of times people have ideas, but maybe not the technical skill. Well, find, when you're out at these things talking about what you're trying to do, you'd be shocked how many people will just throw it out there. People ask me all the time, they're expanding, they need help. And I'll make recommendations to people to talk to. And I would say, you need to know everything, but you should be bringing in people that can do it better than you. That's a little tip that has been thrown, that people have said to me, like, you want to hire better than yourself. You always, you're in the right room if you think you're the dumbest person in the room.
I pride myself in being the dumbest person
Yeah.
in the room wherever I go. I like to, because if I always feel like I'm explaining everything to everyone, I'm like, well, how am I growing? I'm just like, so that's a good point. I wanted to drop this in here. Someone mentioned this in a conversation I was in the other day, that surround themselves with 3 different types of people. People at the same level as them, people at a lower level in business who are trying to get to where they are, and people who are further along that they can learn from. So through that, you kind of become the teacher and the student all in one, by surrounding yourselves by these people to kind of get that different perspective and enable yourself to grow.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly add to that?
Sure, you can.
Sorry.
And then after you.
Just because it relates to this exact thing, and it's the flip side. I found, and when I was younger, it was something that, I became, firstly I burnt out, and then I became a master delegator, and I started delegating too much. And so, yes, hire people who know more than you and who can do the job better, but you still have to understand how everything fits together and how everything works. And if a piece of the puzzle was missing, how you would be able to step in and fill that role. Because I find a lot of people don't do that. And then if something goes wrong, they really don't know what to do, and it's their business.
Yeah, I was just going to throw out there, I would say the worst business partners that I've seen are friends. You should, I have a pretty strict rule. Like, my buddies, I'll tell them stuff that I know when they're, starting business, and especially the entrepreneurs. Like, everyone loves to talk shop, but like, I put a pretty hard wall between my business life and my personal life. And I have seen a lot of personal relationships go sour over business reasons, which, probably they should have never been business together. And I'll give a quick example. We run an investor event. We had a company where, there was 3 guys, they were all college friends, and their head sales guy was literally, I had one of the young women that worked for me came over and was like, who is this guy? He's being super creepy. And I went over and was talking to him. And then I knew the CEO pretty well. And I'm like, who's this guy I've never seen before? Like, and he's like, oh, he's my new head of sales. He's my buddy from college. And I straight up told him, I'm like, well, he's being really creepy with all the women here. My advice is get rid of him.
Yep.
Like, and I'd give very little advice tied, but like, those things happen, and it's, I'm sure, a very difficult conversation, but literally everybody knew that entrepreneur had the creepy guy working for him.
Yeah.
So in a room of 30 investors, how do you think that first impression went? Not good.
I echo, and I say, I'm sure Adam has more examples than he can count, and I do as well, of business partnerships going poorly. And I would say be extremely careful of adding a partner. I would get remarried before I'd add another partner. It's at least as painful to go through the divorce. The business divorce is murderous. And so The clearest picture that I can paint for people, if you're going to form the partnership, two things to think about. One, you can't just make a partner without a taxable event. There's work to be done around that. Like if I have something, an LLC, and I want to cut Clark in, I can't just give Clark, and I can't, Clark, here's 20%. We're in now, we're partners. Clark has a taxable event. You know, the way that you should be considering tax forever is if you have something today that you didn't have yesterday, you'll likely have a taxable event on your hands, and you can do something with that, right? That's where the concept of stock options comes in, whole separate topic. But it would be extremely careful on the in, because they're coming as a part of it, and be very clear what the goals are for that business and why you'd bring on a new partner. I just advised another company. So this is an example of why I say, like, just come and talk to somebody. This is somebody that came to me through my network for help. There's no way they fit as a client, but I'm definitely going to help them. They are investing as three people from, they grew up together in Manhattan through their various careers. They're investing in a restaurant, and one is going to run it. The other two are monetary investors. And I said, I'm going to ask the simple question. Again, they're all friends. What do you guys want? They're like, we want a successful restaurant. And I was like, perfect. I'm going to separate you each for 5 minutes, spend 5 minutes with you, and explain to you why this restaurant is going to fail. And I asked the two monetary investors, what do you want out of this? They wanted to be able to go out to dinner, hang out with their friends, and get a check every year. And I asked the guy who was going to run the restaurant, what do you want? And he basically wanted to build Disney World. So the challenge being, at the end of the year, when there's $100,000 in profit, you got two partners waiting for a check, and you got one partner that wants to put copper roofing in and all kinds of, it was never going to work. It was never, from the minute it started, because their definition of what was a successful business it wasn't lined up. And so be very careful with the partnership and co-founder and all that. You got to be leery of it on the end.
That's
It
great.
can be done, though.
Lloyd, we're going over
It
to you.
can be done.
It can.
Lloyd is
If you marry them.
Yeah. No,
You don't have to marry them for it to work.
I agree with them. I 100% agree. It's very tricky to go into business with friends, with a girlfriend turned fiance. You know what I mean? It's not easy. But like, here's our little secret to how we were able to do it. Luckily for Trisha and myself, I think we're one of the rare stories of a couple that actually grew a business. And for the most part, like, you know, it never really got into like the relationship. Obviously with COVID and stuff, shit got a little hard, but we got through it, and we're in a better place because of that. But I think the most important way to avoid this is, one, if you make any type of organizational chart where the responsibilities are defined. Now, you know, Trisha, her title is Chief Creative Bear. When it comes to creative stuff, she's like way better than I am. And when we collaborate together, you know, communication got to be on point, vision got to be on point, and just the space to disagree and just to work together, it needs to be there. If this organizational chart isn't there and the responsibilities aren't clear, you fucked up. You're gonna fight. It's gonna go to shit immediately. The second thing, it's a little fancy. It's called an operating agreement. Now, this is like the marriage contract of your business, and this is where everything, like all of these worst case scenario things, are really figured out. And you know, you think, oh, if one of us wants to back out or one of us wants to pull out of the business, what happens, right? A lot of really hard questions needs to be asked and answered. And you know, I don't know, maybe I'm lucky in it, but for us, it did work. And I think another key thing is just systems. Like we have a brand manual with how you do everything right. If someone doesn't do it that, they messed up. There's no feelings, there's no gray area. And so even between the two of us, we have systems, and we have we've built again this co-working space that serves us versus us serving it or it ruling over us. And it took years to kind of figure out, but it can be done. But it is hard, especially if you're not in love with your partner. It's extra hard too. So let me just throw that out there. But I've hired friends and I've regretted it. I've seen both sides. And so yeah, it's choose your poison, I guess. Like it can work, but it has its own set of problems. If you don't do that, that has its own set of problems too.
Yeah, Lloyd, I think the key that we're all saying, especially you defined very well, is things need to be defined, planned, and clearly communicated with everybody. I always joke with my team, there's two types of entrepreneurs. The one that's on the ball, very proactive, thinks everything through so everything goes smooth. And the other one is they don't care and they just try to bang a square peg through a round hole until it goes through. I tend to like to work with the former than the latter. But
Yeah. And I saw a comment about fear of the partnership. Don't be afraid of it. Just be aware of it. The most valuable thing potentially could be the partnership. I think the reason for my success, when I started the practice, I was alone. I brought in another partner who Clark has met many a time, Ryan Silva. And the way that we describe our relationship is extremely clear. We describe it to every client coming in as gas and brakes. And it is exactly like if you relied on me, we're pretty close to jail. If you rely on Ryan, you're going to be on the IRS's Christmas list. So we joke about that all the time, that, somewhere meeting in the middle is the appropriate answer.
That's incredible. I love that, Matt. That's wonderful. And just to add to that, I'm starting a new business with a close friend of mine, Alex, who's been on a lot of these meetups. And we have a lot of big ideas for what we want to accomplish. And we've been talking about that. But just this Sunday, we actually just sat down together and just laid out our roles and responsibilities, what we're actually going to be responsible for, what makes us tick, what's our best way of working. We need to change environments. We figured all that shit out that it seems like fugazi, like no one thinks about, but after that session, we're like, yo, we're ready to do this now. We took care of the foundation. Now let's build a fucking house. So I think it's really important to really lay those things out before just going. Because a lot of entrepreneurs want to just go, and I'm like that too, but you got to step back.
Yeah. Ben, I think you're absolutely right. There's got to be structure in place. There's got to be agreement. There's got to be alignment on roles and vision and equity and, all of those types of things that, I think as we've kind of hit on multiple times from multiple different people on this panel, you want to get right the first time and you want to be thoughtful and really think through at the foundational level and formational level of the business. Because if you don't get it right and then you try and unwind it, it can get very expensive, both from just a tax perspective, how to unwind things, from a legal perspective, potentially, it's much harder to correct things than it is, to take the extra time in the beginning, slow down a little bit, think it through, have those conversations, get on the same page. Businesses are built over many years. So an extra week or two or a month or 2 months even, to slow it all down and make sure that there's true alignment and vision. And that's not just in the beginning, but it's also as you grow, how are things going to shift? How are roles going to evolve? Life circumstances, as Matt said, it's a marriage. I mean, it's longer than a marriage in many respects. And you need to be able to figure out how that's going to grow together, how it's going to evolve together, how roles might change. Are you in this for the next couple years, or are you in this for the next, decade plus? I mean, those are really the foundational conversations. You have to be honest about, who brings what skills to the table, who brings the money to the table, who brings the relationships and the sales side to the table, all the different things, product development, engineering, depending on the type of business. So, Ben, I mean, I'm glad to hear you had that conversation. I think it's a great example for everyone on this call who's thinking about starting something and trying to choose the right partner, because as, excited as you are now, it also could have been a conversation where you're like, well, maybe this isn't the right thing for us to do, and we can continue our relationship and be friends, and we'll see, in a year or two, maybe we're in a better place to do this. But you got to be prepared to say no too. Yes is not always the right answer in these situations. And when you're going to start a business and you're going to sink years of your, blood, sweat, tears, and, equity and sweat equity and, other career opportunities you could have had into it, you got to really think it through and, do your level of kind of those types of things.
Yeah, I love that, Adam. Yes is not always the right answer. That's a lot of people are like, yo, yes attitude. I got the yes attitude. That's good sometimes, but sometimes you gotta fucking have the no attitude.
Look, the reality also is, and like I don't say this to be a complete damper, the majority of businesses fail. Vast majority of businesses fail, and the vast majority of founding teams are not the founding teams 6 months to a year to 2 years in. Look at Facebook, look at, pick almost any very successful, business that's been written up, Unicorn, Wall Street Journal, whatever, publication you want to look at. I would, without knowing this, feel pretty safe in assuming that the founding team of, who was really early in those businesses was radically different from, who was involved when it really became a growth business and then a really mature business and really kind of scaled over time, because it takes different skill sets and different, roles. And those aren't the same when you're starting a company versus when you're growing a company. So you need to be prepared to be honest about that. And those conversations evolve. But again, getting back to Ben's example, kudos to you, because it's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And real quick, for everyone watching, I want to thank you again for being here. Make sure if you have any questions for the panelists, drop them in the Q&A at the bottom, because we're going to cover some questions. I have, just looking at the time, I have a question for each of you that I really want to get to. So I'm going to do kind of a power round. So if we like do like a minute answer, but these are all very important. And if anyone wants to jump in, that's okay, jump in. But we're going to keep them kind of quick so we can get through all of these. And while I'm doing that, if anyone has questions, drop them in the Q&A. All right, Lloyd, we're kicking it off with you. All right, a lot of people talk about pivoting. You got to know when to pivot in startups. You got to know when to pivot in startups. When is it time to pivot or to just continue the course? Because, I mean, you've had a brick and mortar, right? And then COVID happened. So, like, did you do a pivot? When is it time to pivot or just keep going? That's what I want to know from you.
That's a great question. I'll use this question to talk about how I function as a CEB, because I think that this always needs to remain the same, and this is how we grew, and this is how we survived COVID, to be honest. So when I first started, or as a CEO, you have a million hats on, right? You have the chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, chief operating officer, but it's all you, right? So it all starts with figuring out how much we needed to make to just stay alive. That's number one. And that's off of, projected sales. And we just needed to figure out how to hit that number. Now, at the time, we had 5 operations: catering, wholesale, 2 brick and mortars, and markets and events, which is like smorgasbord. That was dead. Wholesale died around 90%. Catering, which is like corporate catering, weddings, that pretty much died too. And Boundiana's HQ, our flagship, that wasn't open until June. So all we had was Boundiana's harbor side to basically be the tugboat that kept the company going. And so I'm looking at this financial number we needed to hit. I'm looking at the operations that I have that can actually generate revenue. And from there, it just becomes a marketing game. How the hell do I get people to purchase Boundiana's in the middle of a pandemic? And that's what I did. And so we got on every single delivery platform. We did all we could to be that comfort for people that needed it during such a tough time. And whatever it is that you're selling, I think diversifying your however you can generate revenue is important. Luckily for us, we had these 5 operations. We lost 3, and we did whatever we could with these 2 to survive. Luckily, we got help from the SBA and like these grants and the PPP, and thank God those came in. You know what I mean? But if it wasn't for realizing just how much we needed to make just to survive, realizing that we only had 2 ways to make that money, and just turning up the volume on those 2 ways, we wouldn't have made it. And so no matter if it's during a pandemic or if it's, things are quote unquote normal, that's my process for pivoting and looking at the puzzle pieces and like, okay, this month I'm going to focus way more on catering, or this month I'm going to focus way more on wholesale. The world, the environment makes those puzzle pieces. It just helps shapes those puzzle pieces, and so utilize those pieces to, if you have to pivot because your pieces are saying you have to, you need to listen, because you can't just wing it, honestly. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents.
I love that. Thanks so much, Lloyd. That's an awesome sentiment. I want to jump to Matt, but real quick before, I have a quick ask from anyone watching this. If you're watching this right now and you got a phone, you're on Instagram, take a picture, let people know with the JC Tech Meetup, post it on your story at JC Tech Meetup. Just spread the word. It'd be greatly appreciated. So Matt, talking about finances and accounting and all this fun stuff, as an entrepreneur who's starting off, how much do I really need to be dialed into every penny spent, all these things? Should I be really looking at these every day, or should I focus on building the business? Like,
build a business. You're gonna argue over nickels. You're gonna make poor decisions. You're gonna waste time. You're gonna, even if you've raised money from other people, they're not paying you to watch the nickels. They're like, I don't want to be too far into that direction and say waste money, but you see people pine over the smallest things and making decisions, and it certainly impacts the business performance. You know, remember why the people gave you the money. And so you have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest, but there's also a line between being ridiculous. And so do watch it though. You know, don't do what Megan had mentioned earlier, like bury the head in the sand because you don't understand. You don't look at it and be mindful, but you don't drive yourself bananas. Look at that.
Don't drive yourself bananas.
That was a little plug. I didn't even, that just happened.
We're all paying each other here. Awesome. I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Matt. Jumping over to Megan. I know we touched on briefly, a lot of people in the chat mentioned also mentors, the importance of coaches and mentors. And I know you worked with Francis Mallman, which I'm geeking out over because I'm a big fan of Chef's Table. That's my favorite episode. And you worked with him. So I would like you to share that experience a little bit and how important it is to find a mentor or coach in your career.
Oh man, for me, passion is one of my top core values. And for me, it is so important to be inspired and stay inspired in my business. And I will do whatever it takes in order to do that. And so otherwise, I was 4 years into my restaurant and I was literally dying inside. I was not inspired. I was not motivated. I just lost all the excitement and creativity around my business. And so I needed to remove myself, put myself in a completely different environment, be learning from one of my biggest inspirations, learning some new skills, meeting new people, getting inspired. That really allowed me to take all of that back into the business. And we ended up doing an expansion on the business and scaling the business. And it was invaluable. That time was invaluable. And for me, just mentors and coaches are so important because growth is probably my number one core value over any other value. And I am only learning and growing if I'm investing in the right people. And so for me, finding the right people and really just trusting my intuition and just really knowing, like, I can sift through people, and I can even do it on a screen. Just looking at a screen, I know exactly who I'm connected to without even having to have a conversation with that person. And so really tapping into that and letting that guide me. And it always leads me to the right places and the right people. And then trusting yourself, shifting my money mindset was one of the most challenging things, because it meant that I had to really be on my edge, and I had to push myself towards fear, borrow a lot of money, spend more money than I ever would have imagined I would invest in myself to learn from somebody who I really wanted to learn from. It was a full body yes. Everything in me was saying, yes, do it. And as soon as the ego mind kicked in, it was like, but you can't spend that kind of money on yourself. Like, what are you thinking? What would people say? And despite all of that came up, I went towards it anyway, and I did it. And it was the best thing I ever could have done for myself. So I am a firm believer in finding the right people to invest in and learn from.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing, Megan. Awesome sentiment. Jumping over to Clark, quick question is, as far as when people decide they're ready for funding, what kind of programs does NJEDA offer? And what should they be looking at as far as, should I go to angel investors, go to an organization like your organization, or friends and family? When is the right time to pick one of those avenues?
Sure. So, my funding is all around. So most EDA programs are very targeted. We don't necessarily just throw out wide swaths, which is kind of contrary to what probably most people think. Like, I just, it's a government. I just go and I get money, right? Like, no, that's not really how it works. All of our programs are really targeted, looking for specific types of businesses to support, especially since we're self-funded. If we gave money to everyone and lost it all, well, now there's no economic development for the whole state because there's no taxpayer money coming in here. So like with our direct funding, we're looking for companies that are post-revenue, post-product development, all this more technical stuff. But what I would say is, know who you're investing with and who you're taking money from, because we're a very risk-averse investor. Your traditional equity investor, as other people have talked about, they're looking for growth. They want to see multiples of growth in the revenues and business, because when because they're wanting you to sell that business, that's how they get their money back, and they want to see X times growth. This isn't the stock market. 7% growth is not successful. That's a loss. We measure our success in multiples. So double, triple, 10 times. With my organization, we think a little bit differently. We're thinking about sustainability. So things that an equity investor might look past, there's no way we're looking past. So things like having an investor that we're matching that participates on your board. You got to have a board of directors. We're not looking at it if you don't. You can't, while I love hustlers, we're not going to invest in the guy that's the CEO of 5 different companies. We want you focused, laser in right on your business. And we want to see that you have skin in the game, that you've made some financial commitment into that company. Because those 2 factors, skin in the game and only one business, is a risk mitigator. What's stopping you from just walking away and leaving everybody else holding the bag? Well, if you have your own money in and you have no place else to go, that really means you're probably full send on this venture. The EDA has a lot of different, though, not beyond just money type of support that we throw out there. Now, I don't work in the small business group. I could pass people over to there, but like they had initiative, like a big issue with a lot of, mom and pop brick and mortars was, especially when COVID came out, they had no web presence, let alone an e-commerce presence. Like, what do you do when you own, a bakery and now you have to deliver stuff because no one's allowed in there and, you're not technical savvy. So they actually had set up a program with small amounts of money and already dedicated folks that could help you set up a website. Being involved in tech, and a lot of, you think, oh, that's who doesn't have a website? Like a whole lot of people. I work in tech. Guess what? I don't have an Instagram. I don't need that. None of my friends are part of it. I don't even know how it works. I know, though, if you have a business, you better have an Instagram presence. Instagram, which is Facebook, almost, it's an absurd amount of companies that generate a bulk of their revenue just via Facebook types of sales leads. So, you overlook a couple of those things. And then when it just comes back to money, I'd say if you've made the decision to take money, take what we always reference as smart money, not the contractor, not someone just because the money, they're willing to give it to you. Someone that brings value to the table. It's hard nowadays, but they still are out there. People that will just cut checks, but most, especially angels, are people that have already been there. Like, they're going to be your coach. They already built a bunch of businesses and had successful exits. So they probably know your business maybe even better than you do. Not your specific, but the industry that's there. So take the smart money. And then kind of what Matt was saying, I always refer to guys like, don't squabble over decimal points. Like, like I've had people be like, oh, I only want to sell 20% of my company, and the investors want 22%. And I'll be like, do you need the money? Because your company's worth nothing right now. It's all on paper. You're going to sit here and fight over 2% for 3 months. and you have 6 months worth of or 6 weeks worth of cash left. Like, do the deal, move on with life. You're not gonna. The other thing people don't realize, like, investors are savvy, right? Like, if you need the money now, unless there's something big happens in the next month or two, you're gonna need the money even more then.
Yep.
And then I have a better negotiating power. So
Absolutely. No, that's awesome to think about, Clark. And all that's great. I didn't ask him to say it, but I'm going to jump back to the point that he said about, you need an Instagram presence, you need a Facebook presence, a website. I just want you to know, everyone, I can help you with all those things. So if you're looking for any of those, reach out to me. Clark was not paid for this. All right, awesome. Well, Adam, what are some of the biggest legal pitfalls that entrepreneurs face that they're not aware of, that they just kind of go down the road and then they get fucked in the end? What are the things that happen?
Just quickly before I do answer, I just want to kind of give a plug for the NJDA, which I worked with closely in my prior position. A lot of the programs that Clark was talking about are certainly great, and you'd be surprised some of the ones that you could qualify, maybe you don't. But I think just critically, they have the pulse of kind of the New Jersey ecosystem in a way that not really any other organization does, from regional coverage to different programs, at the county level, at the local level. So I certainly think, anything that you have a question about, they can certainly be a resource, not to dump, a ton of work onto Clark, but they just have a perspective and kind of a platform within the state that's unique. So, just sharing that for whether it's funding, whether it's business planning, very early stage, they have resources, even if it's not direct funding, which is a large part of what they do, but they'll kind of know who to point you to, so they can be helpful from that perspective. I think some of the most common things that I see is, some of the things we frankly talked about, people who, do things quickly without really giving it much thought, don't have the proper structure in place from the beginning. And then, they decide they want to begin to, something's not working out with a co-founder. I had a call with someone last night that was this exact issue. And, they signed an agreement where that co-founder owns, a significant chunk of the equity. And to get them out, they're going to have to get pretty creative, and they're going to have to really figure out, what's going to work for that person, because you go back to the legal documents and they own, 27% of the company, and they're not walking away for free. So I think, those are the types of things, structuring and formation, making sure you get it right from the beginning, as we've alluded to. Those are critical, I think. Look, legal work is expensive. I'll be the first person to say that. And it can become very difficult for early stage companies. But you also need to kind of consider the cost of getting it wrong potentially, and what that could look like, both from an ownership perspective. So, if you own 10% of a company that's growing, and you make a mistake, and you now own, because you've issued more stock or too much stock, effectively 8% of that company, what's called dilution, that's 2%, but does that 2% mean $100, or does that 2% mean several $1 million, $1 billion potentially, ultimately? I mean, not that every company gets to be that stage, but that's just kind of for perspective. A little bit can beat a lot down the road. So you just want to be thoughtful around how you structure equity, how you structure grants. I saw one of the questions in the chat about vesting. So vesting is when you issue stock to someone that they own outright, but it's subject to a company repurchase option effectively, so the company can buy it back. Or it can be forfeited depending on the exact structure of it, if you are no longer providing service as an officer, employee, advisor, consultant to the company. So certainly, just to kind of hit the question, but those are certainly things that we recommend, is making sure that equity grants are subject to vesting, or option grants, depending on the stage of company, are subject to some type of vesting schedule. So that's, I guess, Ben, also to go to your question, kind of making sure that the structure of any equity issuance is being done the right way. One that I don't think is talked about commonly, that I have more conversations with entrepreneurs lately, is making sure that the intellectual property that's developed on behalf of the company, that all of it's properly assigned to the company itself and not owned by any one kind of founder or employee individually. that's something, what's called an invention assignment agreement typically, which is not something that I think even within kind of the entrepreneurial ecosystem and educational perspective, a lot of focus is on, boards, officers, stock, things like that. But the main assets that companies own a lot of times, certainly at the earliest stages, is their intellectual property and their kind of creation and developments, not just, patents and trademarks and things like that, but kind of like the trade secrets, the knowledge of the company. Lloyd, I'm sure, can speak to some of these types of things about, what the company has that maybe is intangible, but that is really valuable, from a marketing perspective, perhaps, for his company. And I think, making sure that those are properly owned and assigned to the company is something we've seen people not do and not get signed. And then, they look to enter into some transaction. And at the 11th hour, the buyer or the investor asks for copies of all those agreements to make sure that there's no cloud over who, that the ownership of the intellectual property resides with the company and not with any one particular individual. And they can't produce them. And it, depending on stage, can be really difficult and expensive and time consuming to go hunt those down from people, who worked with you in the very early game and aren't necessarily around now. They have no reason to sign something like that. So, I think those are the types of things that don't get as much attention, but can be really kind of critical to making sure, all of your files and kind of governance structure is done and set up the right way.
Just to throw in there a little back to Adam, I would say things like assignment and employment agreements I look for, but more importantly, if you are raising money from outside investors, you need a lawyer experienced in raising money, period, stop. And no one wants to hear that you're getting a deal from your Uncle Vinny that does estate law.
Yep.
And the reason why I say that is once you start talking to, experienced entrepreneurs have had multiple large exits, you will be shocked by how many that will say, I spent 5 years building this company, sold it for $100 million and didn't pay attention to the waterfall, wasn't advised correctly, didn't structure it together, and I made this 9-figure business and I got bupkis at the end.
Yeah,
happens
absolutely.
all the time. And that's why you hire a lawyer. They are called counselors sometimes, or counsel. That is, they give you advice and counsel, and they're there to save you from those things or punitive clauses. People sneak things in under the preferences and stuff like that, even the most skilled don't catch. But, a person that's looking for that as their job will find them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, the story that Clark tells, that's heartbreaking that, someone would give away 50% of their company in the beginning. Like, they obviously didn't understand what that actually means and what the implications of that are. Mm-hmm. And that, they don't need to take that deal, presuming there's some level of, other interest, or just generally, it's a deal that so misaligns the incentives to continue to grow and put, the sweat into the company, for the ultimate financial payout down the road, which doesn't come immediately, as I'm sure many people on this call understand. It's a long game here. But yeah, I mean, just anyone who's kind of experienced in the startup ecosystem, whether it's another founder, operator, accountant, someone like Clark, someone like Lloyd, someone like Megan, who has been around this before, and would know to at least press pause before you sign something and talk to some people.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I want to do a super speed round of the questions. I know we're running short on time, and obviously this whole topic, we're just scratching the surface here. So everyone, please follow all of our panelists, follow them, go on the websites. I'm going to give them a chance at the end to say where you can find them. So you can always reach out to them and get more information, because I know there's a ton of stuff they have to share. So what I want to do, knowing that we're kind of wrapping up, is there's some questions here. I'm going to put them out there, and I'm going to say anyone who feels called to answer it, jump in and answer it in 10 seconds. We're going to do 10-second answers. And I'm going to start with this one because I think it's going to be really funny to answer in 10 seconds. And I think everyone should actually answer this one. What's your guys' thoughts on things you see on Shark Tank? In 10 seconds or less. Jump in when you see fit.
It's horseshit.
Not real. If you went on Shark Tank, why would you ever take their money? You just got on TV.
That's great. All right, I feel like that ties it all together. Horse shit, it's fake. All right, cool. We got Shark Tank figured out. All right, next. What are your thoughts on business consultants when starting out, especially with opening restaurants?
Megan, that's got to be you.
Yeah. Sorry, I was definitely going to jump in. I think it can be very beneficial. I do. And it depends on which area you're seeking advice in. But restaurants, it's very systematic. Everybody thinks a restaurant is easy to set up and easy to run. It's very systematic. There's so many moving parts. And yeah, if you can get help, why not?
Like anything else, choose the right partner. They're a partner. They're not a consultant. Choose the right person.
Awesome. Lloyd, drop it.
I think the only thing that I would say is that you'd be surprised about how many free resources are out there. When we first started out, we went to NJCU. They have a small business development center. Jersey City has the JCEDC, Jersey City Economic Development Center. There's a lot of free just business consulting resources out there. I mean, granted, I found value in them. I don't know how different it would be if you actually paid for a consultant, because I've never, met one. But yeah, I would just say shop around. You'd be surprised how much you can learn from free resources.
Awesome. Great. And then the last question, which I don't know can be answered in 10 seconds, but you can feel free to give it a try. If not, they could reach out to you individually. But when should insurance be attained, and what types of insurance are there out there? Answer that in 10 seconds, Matt. Let's get it.
Oh, me. Oh, God. I pawn this off on the attorneys. Business insurance, for sure. I mean, you heard Clark's example. Like, the reality is you need it. I would do it as soon as you had any interaction with an entity outside of yourself and your group. I mean, even within your group, you have potential for litigation. And so, general business insurance, just use your network, find somebody you trust. There's people set up to serve this community that are not trying to kill people, rip them off, do anything. Find the right people. They'll help you.
Yeah, insurance is important. I would say relate to yourself, right? Like, everybody should have health insurance, right? Like, that's a non-starter. You should have it. But like, you don't need, I'm not married. I don't have kids. Like, I don't need life insurance beyond what work gives me, right? Like, no one's got to pay off my house if I kick the bucket. Like, it's just over. So there's different stages. Like, you definitely need general liability insurance right off the bat, but you don't need D&O insurance unless you have a board. So don't get sold.
Right.
Yeah, I think the more mature you get, the more you need to hunker down and begin to really think about it. But like Matt said, talk to someone who knows and understands the insurance game, and find someone you can trust.
Awesome. Well, that was a great speed round of question and answer. I should do it like that every time. That was fun. So, all right, everyone's been awesome here. So much amazing value. I know we just scratched the surface. So everyone, make sure you follow them, all the panelists, and reach out to them where they can help you. I'm going to kind of wrap this up by having everyone go. Just spend a minute to say where people can find you, what's next for you, or any final words you have to say. So I'm going to kick that off with Lloyd. We're going to work our way down.
Cool. So please give us a follow. It's Bao Nanas, BAO Nanas on Instagram, not on Twitter. Facebook, we got that too. We actually have 2 storefronts in Jersey City, 181 Monticello in the Jackson Hill area, and inside the Harborside Atrium in downtown Jersey City. We also ship nationwide in case you are not around and you want to ship it to your house. Even if you live in New Jersey, I swear it's worth it. Visit our website, baonana.com. And hopefully you get to try it out soon if you haven't yet. Thanks.
You shipping to Uruguay?
Maybe. just for Megan.
Awesome. Well, Lloyd, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, man. You've been awesome. Thank you so much. Jumping over to Adam, where people can find you. Any final words?
Sure. Glad to be a part of this. I think it was a great conversation. Hopefully people got some value out of it who participated. McCarter in English, certainly, eminently Googleable. You can Google me, find me on the website, A Sternbach, my last name, at McCarter, MCCARTER.com via email. If you have any questions or follow-ups, always happy to, chat, no strings attached, just kind of share some education, share some knowledge, to help, entrepreneurs who are starting out. I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. trying to get a little bit more active on Twitter with just, some tidbits here and there about, things I see and just kind of broad, non-specific.
You had your account banned last week. You got that all figured out now?
Yeah, exactly. Legal ethics rules on this side versus the I want to actually help people because a lack of good quality, 200, whatever it is now, 40 characters available for people to understand how to kind of navigate as entrepreneurs and think about raising investment. But those are the places. Feel free to reach out. I'm really happy to be helpful.
Love it.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you being here. You've been awesome as always. And then jumping right over to Matt.
Yeah, you can definitely find me at wiss.com, WISS.com. I'm also on Parler, so you could follow me there. One thing I do have to mention is I actually released a podcast last week entitled The Way Too Frequently Asked Questions podcast, where I address almost all of these issues. It's right now, I think, a 15-part series, and it goes through entity formation, taxation, stock options, granting of stock options, preferred stock, convertible instruments, and each one is like 8 minutes long. And just like, what is convertible instrument? Try to do it as plain English accounting as I could. And so that's a good place as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate you being here. It's been incredible.
Oh, by the way, and thank you. This was definitely fun.
Oh yeah, I had a blast too, and a lot of great knowledge dropped. We got the whole thing will be up on YouTube for everyone watching, so all the snippets of knowledge will be there for everyone's taking. Jumping over to Clark.
Yeah, I echo everyone else's statements. Thanks for having me. It was definitely fun. It's real easy to find me. I think I always come up as one of the top Clark Smiths on LinkedIn. So I am open. If you are from the tri-state area and in the startup game, I will accept your invitation.
But there's no beard in the picture. There's no beard.
Yeah, there's no beard, but I mean, like, I'm not the Clark Smith that sells real estate in Omaha, right? I'm the Clark Smith EDA in Jersey. My email is just as simple. It's csmith@njeda.com. I will respond, or someone from my team will respond. Just please be patient when we get an inordinate amount of inbound requests. So, when your number comes, you will get a response. And I counsel all my team to be very quick. If there's something that we don't know, we say we don't know it, and we do our best to point you in the right direction as best I can help. And if I, would leave anybody, with the last comment, I would just say, follow up. If you're going to be in this business game, follow up with people. You'd be shocked how many people I meet out that talk to me about things like fundraising, and I go through and I'm like, wow, they're on point. I could invest. I know 3 or 4 investors that would love this, and I'll give them, like, in the pre-post COVID world, I'd give them a business call and be like, shoot me an email with your exact summary. Like, I'd be happy to introduce you to some people. And I never hear from them again. And like, you blew it, man. Like, yep. I could have, but now, I mean, there's reasons behind that, but obviously that's the thing, I would say follow up with people. Follow up. If you say you're going to do it, then do it. Because I'll add to it if then an investor comes back to me and says, like, yeah, what do you know about this guy? They're like, oh, I liked him, but like he said he was going to do all this stuff and he never followed up.
Follow up.
It's a very small pond. It's a very small pond.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Clark. Appreciate you and everything you shared. All right, Megan, bring it home.
Yes. So the last thing I want to add is, what was coming up a lot in the conversation is finding the right people. And that can be so challenging, especially when you're running a business and you're overwhelmed and you end up making decisions based out of fear because you're desperate, right? So tapping into your intuition is a huge part of that. And I think every single human on this planet should be working with a coach. I really do. Even coaches should be working with coaches because, it really will help you lay your own foundation and understand why you're making decisions and not to make those decisions from fear. So I'll leave it at that. And you can reach out to me on Instagram at meganelof.me. or just Megan Elof on LinkedIn. My email is meganelof@gmail.com. Yeah, if you have any questions, I said to Kimberly she can shout out and reach me on Instagram and chat restaurants. I'm also just happy to add value to anybody, you know, and finding those people who are happy to add value just to build connection and really just support community. I think that's a really vital piece.
Amazing. Well, there you have it. I appreciate you all being here. This is an awesome conversation. I know I had a blast. I'm glad you were all here. I appreciate the panelists. I appreciate the attendees for spending your Tuesday night with us. First event of 2021. It was awesome. So I hope you all join us next month, whether in person at Headroom or online. We have our next event coming up. So thank you all for being here. It was incredible, and I appreciate you. Have a beautiful Tuesday night and a great week.
Same here, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all. Peace.